Hello and welcome back. Today we are going to be going through patch 1.0.8 of the open beta, which is now available. You opt in by right-clicking and going to properties, going to betas, and then opting into the beta. We are going to be doing kind of just a quick and dirty kind of summary of the read-through that we did earlier in terms of what we think are the most significant changes, not having played with the changes extensively, but just on its face, what seems to be kind of the biggest things going on. The goal here is to be expedient and get this video out as quickly as possible, rather than be comprehensive and tested and then get back to you after like a lot of testing. So with that said, let's jump into it like someone jumped into that loud car outside. And the biggest thing seems to be the centralization changes. The centralization changes are enormous. Previously, in every single run, always, you would just push to 100 centralization, and now I think categorically you just never do that in your opener unless you are planning on not expanding with subjects. If you're not expanding with subjects, you can go full centralization, but I think that fundamentally speaking, expansion via subjects is going to be really much better than expanding versus taking stuff. I think that this is like a pretty fundamental gameplay pattern, and now centralization cuts you off from that in kind of two ways. One, it reduces your subject loyalty by up to 30, and two, it more importantly, decentralization will now give you a trend towards or having subjects will give you a trend towards decentralization if those subjects are vassals or fiefdoms, which are the ones you expand with. And so fundamentally, I think that this makes the play pattern such that you never really go centralization early, and maybe during the court and country in Age 5, you make a transition towards centralization during that kind of disaster, which allows you to push centralization, allows you to rework some of your estate privileges, which, generally speaking, your estate privileges, as it stands, all laws and estate privileges, when aggregated, if you pick all the good ones, you will have a decentralization trend anyways. And so this is one of the costs of going centralization, is giving up bits and pieces. And so now you just don't pay the cost, you go decentralization because you can't manage to have a trend if you are getting drift from your fiefdoms and vassals. And so this is kind of a fundamental play pattern, but as I was saying, court and country, maybe you transition towards centralization. I kind of think you don't, but there's maybe some sort of thing there. And so you should get enough trend towards decentralization to also not need to force it extremely early. It will just kind of force itself as time unfolds, and so you probably open with forcing a different value, probably your land versus naval, whichever you are inclined to push, which there aren't too many tools to push, so you'll resolve that relatively quickly and start pushing your other values. The next up is there is a new border opinion in terms of antagonism or the impact of having a shared border that is now impacted by conciliatory belligerent. As it stands, I haven't seen this in extensive kind of things, but I've heard a couple of reports. You get like minus 170 relations with Castile as Portugal, and as Brandenburg, as soon as Bohemia gets a border with you, they break an alliance. And so this seems pretty substantive, such that depending on conciliatory and how much conciliatory and belligerent you have, you will get huge relations penalties on the border. Next up, the economic base scaling calculation has been changed. Let's kind of scroll up and find the portion where we are talking about this. It has been changed. Trade profit and subject tax are going to be part of the economic base calculations. Trade profit being part of this is good. This means that it won't be just free value, but generally speaking, expecting to see trade a lot better. And also, it will be only 0.75% of your tax base, or 0.7 or 75% of your tax base will go to the economic base. So early on, you actually will have a much, much faster economy. But I've heard reports that also for every institution you embrace, you will get an additional 5% increase to your economic base, which I think is a good change that's going to slow down the economy, especially at the top end. But what all of this kind of means in terms of like take home is that you will be making way more money early on before you embrace a bunch of institutions, and trade will be way, way better than it was, because a lot of trades were just completely underwater, and if you're generating money through trades, it'll be much better, and your sliders will effectively be cheaper, and if you keep your slider cost down especially, such that it is lower than your crown power, your trades should always be profitable, and there's not a bunch of opacity and calculations required to determine if your trades are good. Another one is a pretty big buff to high pop nations, which is the scaling for building levels. Every 20k pops instead of 200k pops will give you an extra free building level at a location. So this means building taller is a lot easier. This is generally a buff to all the really high pop nations in kind of a pretty significant way. But I still do love this change, even though I think pops should generally be nerfed, because it's kind of an unfun gameplay pattern where you would have 500,000 people there, and you'd have almost the same kind of max level of buildings, and so you have all these people in a location kind of twiddling their thumbs, and having a bunch of pops in a location is useful for a variety of reasons we won't go into, but it still kind of felt bad. So I do think that this is a nice bit of change to be had. And next up is inland exploration is no longer bricked. Inland exploration is now functional, so that is going to be good. You will be able to explore inland. That will be nice. It was previously kind of just broken. There has been a rebalance with professionals and levies that was kind of featured in last week's update. Generally speaking, professionals are going to be a lot stronger earlier on, and I think levies are going to be a little bit stronger in ages 5 and 6, but for the most part, this was kind of a win for professional armies, so expect to see them just generally a little bit stronger, although not quite as absurd as they were in 1.0.6, I think. There was one patch where they were just completely absurd, and it shouldn't be quite that bad. Prosperity now is going to function differently. Prosperity will now have a decay that is like a target and equilibrium decay, and so this means you will actually have to have positive prosperity is actually now going to be really good, rather than you just want to have like 0.2 prosperity and then you just forget about it, because if you are at 100 prosperity, you will get -1 prosperity decay, and then if you have 0, you'll have 0 decay, and so that means the more and more prosperity you have, the more and more prosperity trend you will need in order to maintain your level of prosperity. So you will need a 0.5% prosperity gain in order to get up to 50 prosperity, as I understand it, based on what people were saying. I haven't loaded into game to check this real quick, but this does seem to be the way it is going to be working, and so now prosperity is an insane modifier, and it's insane everywhere. And speaking of, that means in the bureaucracy law, everyone goes decentralized, because also, the whole point of going centralized bureaucracy was to get a centralization trend, and now you don't care about that. So you just go decentralized bureaucracy, get your 0.25 prosperity on virtually everyone. And so that is going to be a big one. Levies also aren't going to be affecting loyalty when raised. This is a pretty significant one, and there's also other loyalty impacts in that you will also no longer get the +20 or any positive impact from being stronger than other people via loyalty, and there's less loyalty in the tree. But the flip side is that decentralization now gives an extra 10 loyalty, and everyone ought to be going decentralized anyway, so it's probably overall net easier on the loyalty, certainly easier when raising armies, because the fact that people raise their levies is no longer going to brick your loyalty on everyone as soon as you start a war, and so this is going to be a little bit of a thing. Transporting levies also scales with the same size as professional armies, so transporting levies via naval is now as expensive as professionals, which makes it a lot more expensive, and so this means if you are doing something where you need to move around most of your troops via ships, you have to go professionals, or you just like don't have a lot of combat power, generally speaking. And then we already talked about power-to-power loyalty is gone, or you can still get a malice from power-to-power loyalty of you versus your subject, but you could no longer get a bonus. And then finally, we have Deus Vult is now fixed, so that you can only get it if you get the the advance that is present through the administrative focus. And if you don't do that, then you can't use the Deus Vult CB, or you can't use the Religious War CB. You can still use the Cleanse Heresy CB, but not the Heathen CB. And so this makes going administrative focus a little bit better. But also, I think that it's possible that going Diplo focus in the Second Age is really good because you get marches, and if you ever wanted to push centralization, there might be a metagame where you expand exclusively with marches and then use the seize territory interaction to seize their territory before eventually releasing them once they only have one location. And in this way, you can effectively get to have your cake and eat it too, because it's only the vassals and fiefdoms which contribute towards decentralization trends. So you can still push centralization in theory with this kind of play, but I don't know how good that is. And that's kind of been the rough and dirty of the most significant things. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe, do the YouTube algorithm thing, notification bell, etc. Code is generalist on all caps on the official website for purchasing games. If you want to support the channel, it doesn't give you a discount. It just sends 12% my way. And other than that, y'all have a good one. Bye-bye now.